All right, let's talk some cricket now for the first time this month on the SportsMax Zone. With less than a month before fully taking over the coaching duties for the West Indies senior men's teams, former captain Daren Sammy had a sit-down with the media to discuss his plans for the role. Sammy says that planning for the long term is already in full swing.
Teams in the world, regional competition in their territories, what they do on the international scene, mirror it with what we do regionally here in our 4-day competition, which is what we do on the test team, and we've collected all the data. And once we do that, we now could see where we match the world in certain areas and the other areas where we can improve. And like I said, that could be through the technical aspect, through the personnel aspect, and we will give it very good consideration. And then we set our goals from there, whether it be to finish in the top 5 or move our rankings from number, I think it's 8 or 9 to 7 and to 6 and do it gradually.
The St. Lucian also supported the new selection policy adopted by Cricket West Indies.
With eyes on the ground in all the different territories, it makes my job easier when a player comes up who's performing and I could have a call and say, hey, this kid, what have you seen this season? What are his strengths? Because I'm not there on the ground to see. So I think, and that in itself, it makes selection easier for me or for the team. And I think people seem to think they do away with the chairman of selectors and stuff, but still there's a selection process. I don't select teams by myself. You know, from the information gathered from all the talent IDs that is being passed to Jamal, with the information that I have on my analysts, Avinash, who's collecting, and when we've watched the game, then the pool of players come, and then we now put a 11 together and balance the bench.
Now, as it relates to the players who have actually made themselves available for Test cricket, Sammy opted not to give names.
When Miles decides that we're going to announce the test team, you are free to ask me questions about all the guys that will be announced in that testing. But as of now, I cannot. I am speaking to everybody that fits the roles that we want to execute in the test series, in the test squad. Sorry.
All right, let's get the thoughts of our SportsMax captain, Fazir Mohammed, who opted out of playing mass in Trinidad and Tobago. He joins us today. Faz, I know it's a very special time for you in your religion as well. So happy that you could join us this afternoon.
Yes, it is. It's the month of Ramadan, the Muslim month of fasting, day number 2 for us here in most parts of the Caribbean. So yes, Carnival and I are as compatible as Trump and Zelensky. So yeah, let's leave it at that for the moment.
I know. All right. So Faz, based on what we just heard from the coach of all the formats, the teams when it comes to West Indies, let's start with what Coach Sammy spoke about when he said, planning is in full swing, everything is on the way. And just because he's not on the ground doesn't mean that, he's unable to select. He has all the required tools and everything. What did you make of that soundbite?
Well, essentially what he's saying is he's chairman of selectors, because all of what do you call them, talent identifiers, or find some other acronym for them. They essentially will be performing the role of selectors, because that's what selectors do. They gather information, they sit together. Of course, it's about the intangibles as well. It's not just about the base stats. It's a lot more, whether you can tell an individual has the character to step up to the higher level. Is this someone, for example, who's going to succeed at this level, but you question their ability to move up? Do they have what it takes? And that's what it's all about. So it's not just about the numbers, but I understand what he's saying, that basically with everyone saying, how can you have just one person selecting a West Indies team, which effectively he has the final say as a chairman of selectors, for example. He is basically indicating that he's going to be relying on this information from those posted in different parts of the region, together with his information analyst to help him in that direction, which sounds reasonable. But again, we all have to see how it works, because as we've discussed previously, Mariah, and I agree with Lance Whitaker on this, that the state of West Indies cricket performance-wise is not so much selection-related, but systemic.
Yeah, Lance, of course, he always drives that point home. You know, he feels as if, you know, we keep changing coaches, Faz, and the same thing happens. But, you know, I think we had this discussion before, but can you remind me your take on having Daren Sammy coach all three formats of the game? And do you think that it will be effective?
That's up in the air as to whether it will be effective. But yes, I did comment on the process, which I disagreed with. I don't think it was handled well. The fact, and in fact, Daren confirmed it in the discussion, that it only came up in the course of the discussion, the assessment of his role so far as white ball coach. And therefore, it speaks to what I described at the time, and using a common terminology here in Trinidad and Tobago, as vai ki vai. As basically you didn't really have that in mind, but it came up in the discussion, so you decided to throw it out. And Daren Sammy is not someone who's going to turn down a challenge. Certainly not when it comes, as he would see it, to try to improve the status of West Indies Test match cricket. Because remember, not only was he successful with the T20 team in winning 2 titles, famously in 2012 and 2016, but he was also the Test match captain, and indeed fell afoul of the authorities while in that position as well, with the abandonment of the tour of India because of issues surrounding payments and money that was actually sent towards the first-class competition unbeknownst to the players. So yes, he is someone very much invested in West Indies cricket, and I don't expect him to say, well, I disagree with this process, I don't think it'll work, we have to wait and see, and all of that sort of thing, and being skeptical. Of course he's going to be optimistic, but we have to wait and see how it unfolds when the time comes, and that testing time will be against the might of Australia come the end of June.
Yeah, I want to put something to your fans, because I've been listening to all these discussions about white ball players transitioning to the test team, and ever so often, even when you watch international cricket and you'll hear commentators make references suggesting that the best West Indies players are not playing in the West Indies test setup. In the past, we've had leaders, whether coaches or presidents or whatever the case might be, suggesting that, listen, or saying, you can't transition into a West Indies test team unless you play the regional 4-day format, unless you're playing some type of red ball cricket to show your readiness. Again, we hear the talk about some of the white ball players transitioning into the test setup, but I'm looking closely at the regional 4-day competition, and I'm not seeing most of them, if any of them, just yet. From your standpoint, would you fast-track any of these players into the longest format without seeing what they are capable of at the regional 4-day level?
No. And it doesn't have to be the regional 4-day level. It could be some form of first-class competition, whether it's President's 11, Invitational 11. So to me, that is a non-negotiable, in the sense that I'm not saying that they can't adapt. I'm not saying that they can't adjust, but they have to show it first. And for those who will say, how dare you suggest that someone of the caliber of a Nicholas Pooran or a Shea Hope, who's played Test cricket already, or a Sherfin Rutherford, can't make the adjustment? It's simply because they are 2 vastly different games. And Daren Sammy referenced it in that part of the discussion when he mentioned David Warner and Virender Sehwag. But again, of course, Daren would not have been aware of all the details. But yes, everybody references David Warner being the first man to play for Australia without playing a first-class match. But it was a T20 match. And I emphasize that point. In the same way with Virender Sehwag. Sehwag had played a couple of seasons of first-class cricket with Delhi, with North Zone, different formats of the first-class game in India. David Warner had played a couple of seasons of first-class cricket before he played Test cricket. So let's get that point clear, that yes, players have played T20 cricket and even one-day international cricket without any first-class cricket played. I agree with that. That is established. But I don't know of any player who, without playing any first-class cricket at all, has played Test match cricket. And that's why I'm saying that they would have to play some sort of longer form cricket to show that they are attuned to the requirements of the game.
Yeah, very much agree with you, Faz. It's something that I've struggled with, especially in recent times, because I hear the conversation, but what I'm not hearing consistently is we want to see these players playing red ball cricket. And we can point to so many examples. You made the case of Shea Hope, who has already played Test cricket and struggled. I remember Nicholas Puran playing a few first-class matches, went to the New Zealand tour and struggled there. Mind you, all the batsmen struggled there. You go all the way back to someone like a Lendl Simmons, who was a prolific white ball player, but just couldn't make the transition when he played Test cricket. So I think there are enough examples, Faz, for us to be careful, or more than careful, about making the mistake of throwing white ball players into the Test format without seeing them play red ball cricket.
And I think why the West Indies situation is highlighted so often is because there's been an absence of dialogue. And I think that's where the difference is. Daren Sammy also referenced New Zealand as a good example. They've always had dialogue. Occasionally there would be rifts between their Players Association and New Zealand cricket. But generally, they've had a healthy relationship. They've had a mature relationship. And we've talked about that at length, ad nauseum. The fact that you have a situation where, when it comes to the West Indies environment, we still operate with this colonial mentality. I am the Governor General, and you must come on bended knee to me for me to dictate to you. Those days should have changed 20, 30, 40 years ago. They haven't. They should, if they are to change now, they need to change now if we are really going to have a healthy situation of some sort of constructive dialogue with our cricketers, whether they be white ball, red ball, pink ball, orange or yellow ball, if that ever comes to be, if we really want to talk about ensuring the future of West Indies cricket as a viable and competitive entity.
Yeah, it was good to hear Daren Sammy say that he's not trying to make the Test team into a white ball team, meaning throwing all the white ball players. But one of the things he also said is that the West Indies players with the most exposure and experience, exposure to different conditions, the most successful ones are playing white ball cricket. And he pointed out that there are a few who he thinks can transition into the Test format. And I'm also not suggesting, Faz, because I don't want individuals to get the wrong idea, that Daren Sammy was saying he would throw them into the Test format without seeing them play red ball cricket. But I personally want to caution, because I don't think I've been hearing enough of that side of the conversation. But when Daren Sammy Faz speaks about speaking to some of these players and speaking to them about their commitment to West Indies cricket and possibly play the Test format, does it make you more encouraged coming from Daren Sammy, who will be taking over in a month?
Well, it depends on whether having white ball players in the Test team is an encouraging sign. That is an assumption. But I think we could say safely now, after all of the dancing around, that Daren Sammy is Test match coach as well because of his connections with the white ball players. And the feeling is that they would be more attuned to listening to him and being part of a setup in which he is very much involved at a central position as head coach. But again, we need to understand. And again, for those who are saying that here's another dinosaur making it seem that Test match cricket is so vastly different from the red ball, the white ball game, again, talk to anyone who would have played the game, who would have talked about the red ball game, new ball, moving ball, slips, gully, forward, short leg, no restrictions, no 30-yard circle. There are many different elements to it. And yes, there are different skills required and different levels of temperament. And it's not about saying they can't make the adjustment, excuse me, but also it's about saying that, look, it's not automatic, but you don't rule it out completely. It's somewhere in between. And I think Daren Sammy, because of that relationship with so many of these white ball superstars that we have playing all around the world, The feeling is that he may be able to persuade them to make themselves available. I thought Gerard Morrisili asked the direct question that had to come towards the very end, and he didn't want to commit, and you could understand that as well. He's not going to lay the cards on the table as to who wants to play and who doesn't want to play Test cricket because of all the implications involved as to how they will be regarded by Caribbean people. So there are many things tied into there, and I think bottom line, Daren Sammy, because of his association with the white ball game and his connection with these players, that's why he's Test match coach.
Yeah, well, I'll say this, Faz, and I've said this before as well, speaking to the point of whether the Test game is vastly different from the limited overs game. There is a reason the best format for the West Indies for a long time now has been the T20 format, and I believe that it's a lot easier, especially for batsmen, to transition from being quality Test players to being quality 50-over players and quality T20 players than the other way around. I think it is a lot more difficult to transition from being a quality T20 player into being a world-class 50-over and by extension Test player. But that's just me, and I think it's especially difficult for West Indies batsmen because I think at the heart of our problem is that we lack the basic technical competence to bat for long periods while being able to score. So that's just how I see it. So I'm not necessarily as optimistic as a lot of other individuals are. Just check our T20 matches when we get a pitch that's turning or moving a little bit.
Indeed, and that's why we need to be cautious about this. You could have a team packed with T20 stars and it could still be all out for 95.
All right, Faz. Well, we're going to leave you to continue your fasting. Thank you so much for stopping by, and we look forward to talking to you again really soon.
Indeed. Well, the fast concludes in 21 minutes' time, so the countdown is on.
Yeah. All right, Faz. Thank you. Fazir Mohammed there, of course, our cricket analyst, and of course, Faz did commentary earlier in his career as well. Going to take a quick break and come
Have you retired, Faz, from commentary?
Does he still do it? I haven't heard him in a while. Tell
Faz
me.
is still a commentator.
Okay.